We've got a couple hundred miles on our e-bikes now, and one thing that we're noticing is that the gears aren't shifting into place like they did initially, and also the brakes are getting a little mushy. Not quite the stopping power that we had in the beginning. And I knew that all of this was just part of the break-in period as the cables were stretching and the bike had some weight on it and was getting used, things like this. So I knew those were going to have to be addressed. I didn't really know all of that myself, like adjusting derailleurs and the gear selector, not so much. The brakes I could probably adjust myself. I think I'm familiar enough with that. But I wanted to have the bike overall looked at because we put more miles on these bikes than you would a regular bike, just for the simple fact that they're electric. Even though we're pedaling 99% of the time, we put more miles on these bikes than we have any other bikes that we've ever owned. And so I want to make sure that they're in really good shape, keep those tuned up. So I knew the initial tune-up, I could have either loaded them up and taken them to the bike shop and paid maybe $100 a piece or $100 combined. I don't know what the price is for a bike tune-up, and get those looked at, give it the once over. Or I could have watched countless YouTube videos and done that myself, but I didn't really want to do that either. So I decided to call in a professional and do a one-on-one, one-on-two situation, give our bikes a complete once-over. I knew that was going to be expensive, but in this case it wasn't expensive because it was my very best friend, and I'm going to show you a few of the tips that he taught me along the way. So I'm going to have to get my best friend Charlie in another video sometime here, but just to give you a rundown, all through our childhood when we were kids, he was racing BMX bikes. He would travel, do the races, things like this, was always tearing apart and putting together bikes in his shop. Whenever we needed something done on our neighborhood bikes, he was the go-to kid in order to get that done. Fast forward, him and I spent many years in the Marine Corps. We weren't together, but we were in spirit. And then once we got out, we stayed in the same area. Both went to college, and he wanted to be a police officer. So he became a police officer, and as mountain bikes within police departments were becoming a thing, he got in on the ground floor of that, and so now he's the guy in charge of a bicycle program at the police department, large police department that he serves with. He also goes around and does regional and national classes on mountain biking and setting up bike programs within police departments. And as you can imagine, it's not just about riding a bike and pedaling, it's about chasing people down, it's about tackling, it's about how to use weapons, things like this. But then it's also the stuff that isn't quite so sexy, and that is the maintenance of the bikes and how to manage all of that with the riders, the different sizes, weights that they are, different capabilities of the riders, things like this. So you've got to try to match up that program with your staffing challenges, and it's a pretty complex system. But so I asked Charlie, I said, hey Charlie, he knew that we had the e-bikes, and I said, Charlie, would you come over and give me a tune-up on the bikes? And he's, of course, I'll put a toolkit together and come over. We did this on a Friday. I had the afternoon off, he had the day off, and so we did this. He tuned the bikes from top to bottom. There's a couple things that obviously he knew that I didn't know or would not have addressed properly. But there's one thing in particular that he taught me towards the end, and they call it the ABCs. And the A stands for air, the B stands for brakes, and the C stands for the crankshaft. Now, air in the tires, I get that, but I'd probably wait until I saw something that was low before I addressed it. The brakes, I didn't know properly how to adjust the brakes, and I'll go over that in just a moment. And then the crankshaft. Now that one never would have thought of, but as soon as we took the tool out and I put it to the crankshaft, sure enough, they were loose, both of them. And so the ABCs are something that they teach police departments throughout the nation to do. And this is before you go on each and every ride, just the basics. And then they have a different level, it's called quick, and I can get into that later, that they do for maybe extended rides or maybe not quite so often, but every single ride they do an ABC check. And again, that's air, brakes, and crankshaft. So I'm going to show you a couple of those things right now. I know there's no idiots watching, but the tires, need proper inflation, and usually they have a range. So for example, this is the red bike, Red Mini, and you can see right now it's got 16 pounds in the front tire. The range on it is 5 to 30 psi's, and I like to ride, like to put 18 pounds in the front. So let's get that up to 18. A little bit too much, let's bleed that off. 18 even. So we know the A is for air, but in terms of keeping track of all these types of air pressure, I like to keep that on a whiteboard that I've got in the garage. And you can see I've got bikes down here, 18 front, 20 in the rear, and I run those on both of our e-bikes. When it comes to the brakes, and I did not know this, but you want to make sure that the brake handle stops about a finger width from the hand grip. So you can see how when I press that back, it just barely touches my finger when I'm holding on. If it goes any farther, your brakes are too soft. Just like that. These are hydraulic brakes. There's different ways to adjust the brakes with your cables. If you have traditional brakes, these are hydraulic, you can adjust them. But it just barely touches my fingers when it bottoms out, and that's a good adjustment. And the C is for the crankset. So this is an 8mm wrench. Put her in there and make sure that that is snug. Don't over tighten it, but make sure it's snug. I never would have thought of this crankset, but very important. When I first did these, the other one was loose, this one was snug, and I checked it on the other bike, and it needed tightened as well. So that's it, the ABCs for every single ride. One thing you have to understand is these e-bikes, I know we're putting more miles on them than we would regular bikes, and I think that's important to notice. So the wear and tear is coming on quicker, or just the wear, and there's a certain amount of maintenance that you need to do to these bikes, especially with the technology that's built into them, and maybe keep up on the maintenance sooner rather than later. And I didn't know about the ABCs. I'm betting a lot of you didn't know about the ABCs of biking, and I'm glad I know it now for each and every ride, because I want my wife and I to both be safe and make it until our next ride. So if you've enjoyed this video or found it informative, please hit the subscribe button below and like it, and I appreciate it very much, and we'll see you next time.